possibly say who's working and who's not? If you're not claiming benefits, if you're not retired, if you're in work, you're making a living, then you're a working person. And this idea that certain people don't fall into that bracket, be it because they're landlords or because they earn over £100,000 a year, which is another suggestion that Keir Starmer's made, is obscene and quite ridiculous, really, and offensive.
The trust in Starmer has collapsed. He lies relentlessly and tries to shift all the blame for the country's problems onto the opposition. His blatant deceptive statements are exposed again and again by experts, and this is simply outrageous. Today I am ready to share the latest news with you, and right now we are moving on to the first scene.
We don't have the water infrastructure we need to build the homes across the country that people want to see. As things stand, by the mid-2030s, we will start to run out of drinking water because in that decade, supply will not keep up with demand. Now, I don't want to get into the position of some Mediterranean countries where water is...
These alarming words came against the background of shocking proposals by water supply companies to raise tariffs by as much as 84% by 2030. Without urgent measures to improve water supply and infrastructure, we risk facing a situation where demand for drinking water exceeds supply, as is already happening in some Mediterranean countries. The government is finally beginning to respond to this critical situation by conducting the largest audit of the water industry in the last 40 years, initiated after the high-profile scandals related to sewerage. The Commission, headed by the former Deputy Governor of the Bank of England, should bring order to the water sector, including the adoption of a law that will ban insane bonuses for managers of water supply companies and criminalize large leaks. Although he rejected the idea of nationalizing the water sector due to high costs, he explicitly pointed to regulatory failures as the main cause of the problem. The co-chair of the Green Party furiously criticized the government's position, stressing that water should belong to society and serve for the benefit of all, and not be a tool for profit.
Well, let's think about what the Office for National Statistics thinks of a working person when they're telling us how many people are in work and how many people are unemployed. By their measure, a working person is someone who's not too young to work, someone who's not retired, someone who's not wholly living on benefits. It's somebody that has a job, contributes to the economy, and makes a living. They are the people who are economically active. Those who don't fall into that bracket are economically inactive, and we're having, unfortunately, a growing cohort of those numbers of people now. So this idea that certain people who do work for a living are not actually working people is not only bizarre, I think it's completely offensive.
This completely absurd logic has already disgraced Starmer and put him in a humiliating position when he had to face an incredibly difficult task to determine who is actually a working person. Angela Rayner noted that working people can be described as those who suffered from the callous policies of the last Conservative government. She gave a very broad concept. Starmer seems to have finally closed the door on his party's previous policies. If you invest in stocks or rental properties, then, according to this crazy government, you are no longer considered working. It's just shocking. It turns out that if you have enough free funds to cover unforeseen expenses, you automatically lose the status of a working person. It's so absurd, it just doesn't fit in my head. This contradicts everything we know about work and dignity. How can the meaning of words be so distorted? It's not just a mistake, it's complete madness.
How can you possibly say who's working and who's not? If you're not claiming benefits, if you're not retired, if you're in work, you're making a living, then you're a working person. And this idea that certain people don't fall into that bracket, be it because they're landlords or because they earn over £100,000 a year, which is another suggestion that Keir Starmer's made, is obscene and quite ridiculous, really, and offensive. And it's just a fudge to try and get past that manifesto pledge that Labour made that they would not raise taxes on working people. It's just a fudge to try and raise taxes, in particular to pay for their extortionate public sector pay rises. That's my view.
According to a well-known sponsor of the party, Starmer was trapped. He could not just return tens of thousands of pounds spent on free gifts. The Prime Minister's salary of approximately £150,000 is not large in his opinion. He also stated with confidence that there was no corruption in the actions of Starmer, who took £32,000 from Lord Ali to buy clothes. How can you say that when it comes to such huge sums? These words came after Starmer, forced under pressure, agreed to return £6,000 for free services he used after the election.
How do you rate most politicians?
Talentless.
That's
Why?
That's a nice word, because none of them, A, got any real-life experience, and B, they don't know how to connect with people. None of them are very good in them, by far and large, good communicators. Look at David Lammy. He is an appalling foreign secretary.
Well, he's gone round accusing various world leaders
absolutely.
of
Trump's going to win in a couple of weeks' time. Whether we like it or not, I think it's indisputable. Trump's going to win.
Among other things, the terrifying problems in Lammy's intelligence became apparent. Participating in the TV game, he shocked not only the presenter, but also the audience with his answers, leaving them completely perplexed. These shameful moments for the foreign minister are no exception, but a real tragedy that repeats itself over and over again. Every time Lammy finds himself in the spotlight, he reminds us that in modern Britain, competence and professionalism for governing the country have long lost their importance.
So we've got two big foreign policy things happening literally right now. We've got a US election and we've got reparations. And David Lammy has called the bloke who might be about to become the President of the United States again a neo-Nazi sympathising, woman-hating sociopath. And he's openly called for reparations like 8 times, right? How can he be our foreign secretary?
He's not fit for office, is he?
Well, because I mean, a lot of people have said things about Trump when they're not in, they're not in government, including Kamala Harris herself has called him a fascist this week.
But she's his opponent, and also she's a.
It's not a secret, particularly this week with our lovely volunteers there. Which party Labour supports in America?
That's what I think is the bigger issue. I actually think is political election interfering for one political party, particularly the party of government, to send its activists to campaign for somebody.
David Lammy, in a panic trying to justify himself for his insulting attacks against Donald Trump, found himself in an extremely awkward situation. Recently, he has sharply softened his position towards the former president. During a tense interview, the presenter, with a sly smile, read out to Lammy a whole series of his own toxic tweets directed against Trump. She didn't give him a chance and asked how he was going to build a working relationship with a man whom he had humiliated more than once, who would suddenly become president. In response, Lammy tried to dodge a direct response, saying that many of his colleagues from both parties also humiliated Trump during his presidency. Meanwhile, Harris, realizing that her position is shaky, is trying to present Trump as a real threat to democracy and the fundamental principles of the American state. She is desperately trying to attract undecided voters, including Republicans, and realizing that she is losing support, begins to intensify her rhetoric to the limit, reaching shocking comparisons.
What do they mean by a working person? You see, this is a class war issue with Labour. Let's make no bones about this. This is exactly where they're at on this. No, we didn't mean all working people. We just meant, a certain amount of working people. Just some working people, not all working people. Right, OK. So who are the some working people that get a break and the other working people who are apparently surplus to requirements and will get a tax hike? 0344 499 1000. What is a working person then in their minds? I genuinely believe in that kind of Rayner-esque, Starmer-esque, Lammy-esque, Reeves-esque sort of way that it's that. They just sense it's about people who work in coal mines. Not about anyone else, just about that lot. I think they will rue the day that they came out with this phrase, work.
Starmer furiously rejected accusations that he was waging a real war against the middle class after claiming that shareholders and landowners had nothing to do with working people. While Rachel Reeves is preparing to introduce the highest taxes in the last 30 years, which will lead to huge additional revenues of about £35 billion and raise the tax burden to unprecedented records, workers remain in the dark. The Labour manifesto declares with pathos that they will protect workers from ruthless price increases. But here's the trouble: ministers have been unable to come to an agreement for several months on how to determine exactly who these workers are. Currently, employers are required to pay insurance premiums in the amount of 13.8% of employees' salaries, exceeding £9,100 per year. But here's the paradox: firms do not pay social security contributions from the money they transfer to pension funds for their employees. The IFS previously proposed a reform, calculating that if employers started charging 13.8% of national insurance for pension contributions, it could bring in an additional £17 billion a year. But there is a fear that companies will not be able to cope with these additional costs, and as a result, pension funds will be at risk of catastrophic cuts. What do you think about it? See you in next video.